Do the Chargers really want to go all in? All-pro linebacker Roquan Smith has requested a trade. Does Tom Telesco have another big swing on the defensive side in him?
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier. We've been covering the Chargers together for over 6 seasons now, but we're heading into our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen. To make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and you can also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. But David, Roquan Smith basically set Chargers Twitter on fire when he requested a trade from the Chicago Bears. So we have to start there, and if that makes any sense for him and Brandon Staley to reunite. But we're also going to talk about a couple of young corners stepping up, or defensive backs, I should say, with Jasir Taylor getting a pick 6 off of Justin Herbert. And we have to talk about the unofficial depth chart that was released by the Chargers and tell you why you shouldn't be freaking out, but also tell you where they got it the most wrong. David, it starts with Roquan Smith, though, and that is something that's obviously enticing because obviously the Chargers made a bunch of big moves defensively. One of their weak spots, I think one of the areas they have the biggest question marks for sure, is at linebacker. Now Roquan Smith becomes available, and it's not hard to see why that should interest the Chargers because of obviously where it could take this defense.
Yeah, I mean, right now you look at the linebacker position, and it's one of the position groups on the Chargers defense that looks very, very worrisome at the moment. You got several injuries in that group right now. Kenneth Murray has been on the PUP list. Drew Tranquil has been nursing an injury. They've had several guys that have been having some issues in that room. And so when a guy of this caliber, an all-pro linebacker, becomes available, and there is some significant ties between the Chargers head coach Brandon Staley and Roquan Smith, it's logical to put those things together and say, well, why don't the Chargers go out there and try to get Roquan Smith?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. In a vacuum, you can add Roquan Smith, you're doing it, right? And like the biggest thing, the biggest catch is going to be the financial part of it. But just as far as what he would bring to the Chargers defense, I mean, you have elite playmakers at almost every position on defense.
yeah.
Edge rusher, safety, cornerback for sure. Defensive line, you've gotten much better, obviously. Linebacker, I mean, even when those guys were healthy, it was an uncertain position, right? You don't really know what to expect for Kenneth Murray. Kyle Van Noy, we felt like, was brought in to be more of an edge rusher, right? And he's kind of had to go to inside linebacker because of all the injuries that have happened there. And that's not a terrible thing. But now Drew Tranquil and all of that stuff. But even with all those guys, Roquan Smith is a huge addition. This is a guy that's been, in the last of the 2 top 10 lists done by ESPN, asking coaches, executives, and players about who in the league should be ranked highly in the, top 10. He's ranked 5th last year and 6th the year before. So he obviously has the respect of everyone around the league as one of the top linebackers. And the nice thing is how complete of a player he is. And that was echoed in those statements. There was someone in this year's ESPN article that said the best overall linebacker in football, in my opinion. Others might be slightly better in one of the 4 facets of the game: run game, pass coverage, blitzer, and leadership. But that kid is top 4 in every category. Also had the second most tackles for loss in 2020. He had 18 tackles for loss in 2020, which is a ridiculous number. We know the Chargers could use a little bit more of that, and he's always near the top in run defense stops as well. It's interesting, David, because he obviously has the respect around the league. If you got a Pro Football Focus, it's not going to give you those same kind of results with it. But also, if you go there as well, I mean, you see that one of his best seasons was when he was in Vic Fangio's system, which was where he was drafted to be, right in that system with the Chicago Bears. And that's when Brandon Staley and him intersected. I mean, but he's just a guy that would take your team to the next level. But the real question is, though, is it feasible? Does it make sense for the Chargers to make a trade like this? Obviously, it would cost a lot of draft capital, and he wants a new contract to come with it as well.
Yeah, I mean, Roquan Smith definitely has the pedigree. 120 plus tackles in 3 of his 4 seasons, 43 tackles for loss, 14 sacks, 5 interceptions. He has a very well-rounded, stat sheet. This guy,
that's filling up the stat sheet for sure.
Yeah. He does everything.
163 tackles last season. That's insane.
Right. Yeah, he's an absolute an animal. He's a tackling machine. Now, as far as, is it feasible? Does it make sense? I mean, as a, with, just taking all the other aspects out of it, of course it makes sense, but can it be done? And looking at this situation with the Chargers, I don't think it's possible, unfortunately, here because of the Derwin James contract. They already have a player that they're trying to negotiate, probably making him one of the highest paid players at his position.
The
And
highest
Roquan
paid.
Smith wants a new contract. So that would be not only bringing in another player, but you're bringing in a player that wants to another big money deal, and the Chargers don't have the money to really move that around. They're already in negative cap space situation as the cap is projected right now for next year. And so I just don't see it being possible from that front. And also, it just comes down to the very bare point that the Chargers just don't really, in this defense, don't really value paying linebackers. They let Kaiser White walk for pennies on the dollar. So that should give you the biggest indication of why I don't think this move is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you want for $4 million, right? And they signed Troy Reader for like 2 or something along those lines. So it's like they don't value paying them. It's hard to imagine them valuing sending, valuable draft assets for that, right? The Chargers probably wouldn't be guaranteeing the extension right away, so that makes them less likely in some sense to go to the Chargers. But the other part of it is, if it was a rental, it would make a ton of sense, right? It's if you could send a 6th-round pick to get Roquan Smith for this year to try to make it a run at a Super Bowl, you absolutely do that, right?
Definitely.
But somebody's going to outbid you who wants to make him part of their future for that defense. And that's the biggest thing, because he could help you this year if that would be as much of an all-in move that you could have. And salary cap wise, yes, you can restructure, right? I mean, Arjun Manan on Twitter put out a great piece today about where the Chargers are at in effective cap space next year, which is not a good spot. But they also have one of the top numbers of restructurable contracts that they could really move things around a lot, which is why you feel good about Derwin James' deal getting done, because that's not included in the negative cap space they're already projected right now. But yes, you can get things done. You can restructure things. But can you restructure things to get Derwin in and a Roquan Smith deal in, that extension that's going to, make him the highest paid linebacker in the league? I don't think so. You can only pay so many dudes. You have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and JC Jackson at top of the market deals. You also have Derwin James, probably about to be the highest paid safety in the league, not even including deals for Corey Linsley, deals for, the other guys on offense like
Keenan Allen, Mike Williams,
both making $20+ million a season. So I just think from
not
that
to mention
aspect,
Herbie's extension that is, going to be.
Let's not even get into that, man. We don't even have to think about that yet. Thank God. But from that aspect, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. As much as it would help them this year, I just can't see them sending assets to not extend him, which wouldn't really fit in their plans right now.
Yeah, and like I said, like we were talking before the show, before we started recording here, we don't know what the agents part of this is going to be either. I mean, are the agents going? I mean, because it's most of the time when players request a trade, the teams say, "Hey, all right, go talk to teams and see what what you can do, what you can get out of this." And if the agent can't find a team, with like the Chargers who would not be willing to give him a long-term contract, do they even want to bring that to the Bears as a possible trade partner? Probably not. Right? Because the agent is working for the player and what's best in the best interest of a 25-year-old all-pro linebacker. Of course, he wants to make a lot of money. He is in the prime of his career, and this is the time. In the NFL, your shelf life is so short, so you have to take every opportunity you can to bank as much money as possible. So it makes sense as to why Roquan Smith is requesting a trade. Now, the Bears have not said that they are going to allow him to go out there and get a trade. But if it does happen, it would make sense as to why the Chargers would be interested, but it does not make sense as a move that they would make.
Yeah, and I mean, how many players have we seen hold out for contracts this year, right? Deebo Samuel was holding out. Like, all these dudes were holding out at one point, and then they usually end up getting the contracts they're looking for.
Yeah.
The Bears are a little bit different, because it's like, when are they going to be good again? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he just really wants to get out of Chicago. It's not just a money thing, but the money thing is
it's a clear restructure there.
He's not going to go somewhere where he doesn't think he's going to get that extension from the team. And I mean, if it's between Derwin James, obviously, and Roquan Smith, that's easy. Not saying that it is, but I think that where the priority is for the Chargers right now is Derwin James. And I just think that there's no chance Tom Telesco will pull something like this off. There's a BetOnline.net bet on it. I'm going to hammer the no on that one. As good as odds as the Chargers might be, I would for sure go that direction. But Tom Telesco's also done a lot of things that have surprised me that I never thought he would do this offseason. So you never know. But I don't think it's likely. I think it's a fun thing to talk about. but I don't think it's very realistic to actually happen for the Chargers. But I do want to talk about some players who stood out at camp this week, especially a couple of young defensive backs that are shaking up the depth chart a little bit before getting into that unofficial depth chart for the Chargers everyone's been freaking out about coming up after this. But I do need to tell you guys that if you do want to go, think Roquan Smith is going to be the thing. Betting season is right around the corner. The best time to bet of the entire year is about to be here. Football season is about to be back. We got preseason games already coming. The only place you should go with all of your bets is betonline.net. It's the only place that I go to place any of my bets. And football season is about to be back. There's nothing like betting on football. It's the best thing to bet on. I'm so excited. BetOnline.net makes everything better, right? It makes betting on baseball better, betting on golf better, betting on UFC better, especially when football's not around. But the King's coming back, baby, and football is going to be back, and I can't wait for my Sundays with BetOnline, all the fun props, odds, and lines that they have over there, because they always make it fun and give you great odds as well. But head over to BetOnline today on your mobile device or your desktop to check out all of the action that is happening at BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, David. Well, I do want to talk about a couple of defenders and the latest coming out of Chargers training camp. And thank you to, Daniel Popper and all the guys that are out there putting out all these reports of what's going on. But the biggest play that everyone's been talking about so far from training camp, at least as far as their practice on Tuesday goes, was Jasir Taylor, the rookie 6th-round cornerback that got a pick six off of Justin Herbert. That's something you'll tell your grandkids someday, I think. I mean, that is, even in training camp, a pretty cool thing to do. And doing it on a 3rd down when you're covering Keenan Allen, when the defensive coordinator subs you in at the last second, according to Daniel Popper, that's how it played out. He got his moment in the big time. He got a pick six with it. And now, we kind of been talking about him and Dean Leonard maybe fighting for that final roster spot. It's kind of swung back and forth. Both of them have made big plays. But it seems like right now, both of them are right in the middle of this competition. And Jasir Taylor just take another step towards maybe getting that spot.
It's like a big heavyweight fight, man. Just throwing big shots after big shots.
Two of the smallest guys on the team.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. Two of the smallest guys, but they are heavyweights at heart. They're throwing big haymakers left and right. And Jasir Taylor threw a big haymaker here in practice by covering a 3rd down demon, one of the best 3rd down wide receivers in the NFL, and Keenan Allen, and obviously a MVP candidate in Justin Herbert, and getting a pick six. That is crazy awesome for Jasir Taylor. I mean, where he's at right now in his rookie season, getting drafted, where he knows that he is fighting for his NFL life. Yeah, he got drafted, which is great, but it's a late round pick, man. So you got to make plays. This is a huge one. Obviously, the preseason games are going to be so incredibly important for guys like Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard. But hey, this is a big moment for him, and it should be celebrated.
Yeah, you're talking about, if you're 6th and 7th round pick, you're not safe, right? We know how loaded this defensive backfield is, and a lot of young guys, right? Like Kamon Hall and Tavon Campbell. Where are they stacking up right now as guys that have some experience, but neither one of those guys, is so good that it's unthinkable for them to lose their spot, right? With these young guys making plays, it's going to make things a lot tougher, and that's what you want, is that competition. But when you were talking about that, and about them trying to make the team, right, it made me think about Josh Palmer today, just saying, like, I just want to make the team, right?
So funny, it's the 3rd round pick. Get out of here with that.
Breakout season on the way. He's like,
Justin Herbert, PR school.
Totally. I just think of like T. Billy last year, right? Like Tyron Johnson. He's like, well, damn. Tyron Johnson was here playing real well, catching D balls from Justin Herbert. He was just gone. Like, I don't want that to be me. And then Josh Palmer, like, waits, and like the cut deadline finally happened. He's like, oh, thank God. Like, I made the team now.
Like there was ever a doubt.
Totally. But, he also got some high praise from the defensive coordinator, Ronaldo Hill, who was calling all the defensive plays because Brandon Staley was at surgery for his son's toe, who had maybe an infection and had to get surgery today, according to Daniel Popper and a couple of different reporters. So
hopefully that
best
went well.
Of luck to the Staley family, of course, our well wishes and thoughts for sure. But Ronaldo Hill got the reins today, and he had some fun things to say specifically about Jasir Taylor. And what he said was this: his growth potential is really high right now. We expect some good things from him. Once those lights come on, we really want to see him perform at a high level because he has the mental and physical to get it done. I'm happy with how he's been performing so far. But another defensive back I want to talk about, David, is JT Woods, because he's a guy I think comes in with a lot of expectations. He was the second highest drafted player for the Chargers this season.
Yeah.
And also led college football in interceptions last year, has blazing speed, has a quick trigger to get downhill, makes big plays all the time, but seemingly has struggled early on in camp. We weren't hearing a bunch about it. A lot of reports were coming out, he's lined up in the wrong spots. He's not getting to where he needs to be. And that is a process as a young defender. But it does seem like lately, David, he's recently been kind of coming on a little bit. Not that he's going to, play a ton of snaps this year, is going to be a borderline starting safety after those two guys, Derwin James and Nazir Adderley, when they're playing other positions. Maybe we were expecting a little bit too much. It's still nice to see he's coming along as camp goes on.
Yeah. I mean, DC coordinator here, Ronaldo Hill talked about just saying, hey, where he went to college, they didn't really ask him to really run stop very much.
In the Big 12.
Yeah, in the Big 12, they didn't ask him to stick his head in there and run support a lot. But he said, we're asking him to read his keys, see his key, and then be able to react. He's coming along these last couple of days. He's really progressed. He runs with the ones. We're just mixing him in there. We're trying to see if we can speed that development up, just like we're talking about the last time we were out here. So it seems like this is a common theme for just Brandon Staley and Ronaldo Hill as far as philosophies, is they want to just pour as much on these players as humanly possible, kind of drown them in the scheme and kind of make them feel like they need to ask these questions because they want to see how much they can absorb. And they also said, hey, when we get to game time and we get into games, our game plans are going to be more specific as to what we're asking them to do. But us exposing them to everything that we possibly can is going to be able to allow us to test their aptitude and see what they can get done and see what they understand. And then they can try to figure out where the deficiencies lie in that, and they can try to correct those as coaches. So, it's a different concept we haven't seen here, but it seems like JT Woods, the game is starting to slow down little by little for him. And that's what you want to hear.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think the other comments from Ronaldo Hill about him were a little bit more interesting to me, just because this is what he said in his other comments. At the same time, he has never really had a full offseason to develop. He would go from football into track in college because he's so dang fast. So he missed some of that development that you get over there, whether that's in the weight room with the other guys that are doing the offseason program. Now he's a football player. He's a National Football League player. He gets off seasons now, but he has to get this time. Even in the downtime, he doesn't have class anymore. He can go over there and get some more work in. That's what we're hoping. I don't know. I don't know how to take that, because that seems a little bit more critical of like, hey, this dude has some work to be done. He doesn't have class he has to go to now. He doesn't have track. He has to be invested in football all the time. And you don't want to read too much into this or, take anything away from his work ethic or anything like that. But it's kind of like, hey, you have to live football right now. It's not just when you're on the field.
Well, it also could be like, hey, now you can live football. Now you can eat, sleep, and breathe football, and that's going to be your singular focus. This is your job now. You don't have to worry about school. You don't got to worry about track. You are a professional football player now. That is your sole focus. That's what we need you to be focusing on at all times.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and that's what it is. But you need him to, right? Like that's the thing, is it's like it's not an option now. You don't get to go skip weight room because you're going off to track. You have to be in here all the time. But it just seems I am saying like, and that's what we're hoping for, like him getting extra work. He did also say he's been working with some of the coaches as well to try to get right. But it doesn't seem like he's the guy right now, just based on these comments. It's going to be getting on the field early on in the season, right? Or is, a sure thing to get on. With him, it's always been the preseason, right? Because with him, the biggest question was, okay, how is he going to get fit in the run game, right? And that's what he was talking about with the Big 12, having to fit a bunch of runs.
Yeah.
It was always going to be tackling. We were never going to find that out until the preseason. So this is still the biggest part of this is still ahead of him, and he has a chance to really show out and make some big plays like we've seen some other players do in the past. But we do have one more segment to get into, and we want to talk about the unofficial Chargers depth chart, because a lot of people are freaking out about it. There were a couple of things. I think most of it's right, even though it is unofficial. I mean, I think most of it's pretty accurate, but there's a couple we definitely took exception on. So we're going to talk about guys like Braden Fehoko is going to be like the 7th best defensive tackle. Get out of here with that. We'll talk about the biggest mistakes made on the unofficial depth chart coming up right after this. The Chargers have put out their unofficial depth chart for the first time, done by the Chargers communication staff, not by the coaches. I wonder why I even put it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, they have to, just
Yeah,
by
I mean,
league rules before the first
like,
preseason game, they have to put a depth chart out.
sure. I mean, I
Yeah.
get it. It's just like they like specifically to say like the Chargers communication team and stuff like that. I mean, it just obviously a lot of thought did go into it because most of that is kind of what we're expecting to happen, anyways.
Yeah.
And we're also here to tell you, right? Don't be concerned about, Storm Norton being the starting right tackle. They're
It
doing a lot
says
of
or,
ors on
by
there,
the
right?
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Now I like that too. It's like Xander Horvath or Gabe Neighbors, right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But certain guys didn't get the or, right?
No.
But first things first, though, take everything you see here with a grain of salt, right? On the Chargers
Please.
official depth
Yes.
chart. Everything is how you'd think it would be. The starting offensive line is exactly where you think it'd be. Zion Johnson starting at right guard as a rookie. The wide receivers, maybe you can make an argument now, DeAndre Carter over Jalen Guyton for wide receiver 4. Whatever. Those ones aren't as much, but I do think one of the ones, David, where it's very wrong, like I said, was Braden Fehoko being behind Christian Covington on the depth chart, because we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but like it just seems like this dude just continues to keep making plays. And Christian Covington, at least from my perspective, the practices I went to, which is not all of them, and what I hear coming out of training camp, I'm not hearing much about Christian Covington. Yet every time I read anything, I see Braden Fehoko tackle for loss on this series. Braden Fehoko doing this, Braden Fehoko doing that. And that's one I would say, okay, to me, based on performance-wise, I feel like Braden Fehoko definitely should be on that top 6 defensive tackles, the guys that we expect to make the team.
If I didn't know that the Chargers signed Christian Covington to a $1 million deal earlier this offseason, I would have not known that he was on the team right now. That's how quiet his training camp has been. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you can't miss him,
right.
But he hasn't made a lot of plays at training camp. His name has not been called. And this is the place you want to be noticed. You want to make plays. You want to get those tackles for losses. You want to put your hands up and bat down passes. I haven't heard him do any of those things so far in training camp. But I have heard Braden Fehoko in the, getting in the background, getting those tackles for loss, making plays, and it's been seemingly every single day. So that one doesn't make sense for me. I don't know why they put it that way. That one is clearly wrong.
I mean, I think, if this is just the Chargers communication thing, it's probably just like, okay, well, Christian Covington was here last year and played more than Braden Fehoko
exactly.
is, right? So we're going to kind of revert back to that in some sense. And I think it was the same thing for like a Larry Roundtree versus Isaiah Spiller. And this is another one, David, where it's not going to be like, I'm excited to see both of these dudes. I mean, later this week, Friday, we'll get into the guys we're most excited to see in our preseason game preview for the first time of the 2022 calendar year. Very excited about that. Well, at least the first preseason one. We did have a January 9th game, but you get the point. Either way, I mean, I think the same thing, right? I mean, I think it's like with that where it's like, it's not that I know Larry Roundtree has done bad, because when I've seen him, it's just kind of been whatever. I mean, nothing flashy, nothing different. But at least in the case for Isaiah Spiller, the comments have been very, good from the coaching staff and everything like that, especially as far as his pass protection goes, right? And his hands have stood out. Like you have seen some plays. I mean, he had a beautiful play in the scrimmage, over the shoulder catch on a scramble play by Easton Stick. He's made an impact so far. So I do think, even though, yes, this decision hasn't been made yet, he's not officially the second running back, or in this case, the third running back behind Josh Kelly and Austin Eckler, I would absolutely have him on my official depth chart above Larry Roundtree.
Yeah, I mean, all the practices that we've seen in person and all the notes that we've read, Isaiah Spiller is out there making plays. The hands have showed up. He's running physically, obviously, for the thud tempo that they're going through right now. He's been making plays. Larry Roundtree has not been doing as well. He's had a couple explosive runs here and there that I've read about, but it has been a lot more few and far between on his behalf there. So the preseason is going to be huge. I mean, I still think there's a lot to be found out, to be discovered here with this battle with the running backs. But, as far as, what I've seen and what I've read, it seems pretty obvious that Isaiah Spiller has been the one that has been running with the ones and twos a lot more often than Larry Roundtree has.
Yeah, I mean, and as he should, right? You're trying to see what you have. You at least have 1 year of tape on Larry Roundtree.
Yes.
You know at least a little bit about that. Right now, you need to know. And for the Chargers, it's much better off if Isaiah Spiller is in your top 3 running backs. And I just don't think there's any chance he's not. I mean, he's much closer to Josh Kelly at RB2 than he is to Larry Roundtree at RB4.
No
I'll
doubt.
put it that way, at least on my official depth chart, because, I mean, you have your unofficial depth chart. I have my, top secret official depth chart, but a lot of it's the same. And that's the thing about this list is just like, yeah, I mean, even though it's unofficial, this is how we see a lot of it playing out.
Yeah.
But I do think there is one, David, where it's worth the conversation, and that's Kamon Hall over guys like Dean Leonard and Jasir Taylor. And I'm guessing it's like that because Kamon Hall was with the team last year, right? These other guys are rookies, so they're coming in as DBs 7 and 8 in this equation, right? Behind Tavon Campbell and behind Kamon Hall. While I do think, with Jasir Taylor getting a pick 6 off of Justin Herbert, with the Dean Leonard and how he's kind of shut some dudes down at times during this camp, that they deserve to be in the conversation for these last couple of spots with Tavon Campbell and with Kamon Hall.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think these two young cornerbacks have made plays. They have made strides. It seems like there have been days where they really have showed that they belong here and that they're really trying to fight for a spot. But also, Kamon Hall did get on the field several times for the Chargers last year and was a big, special teams contributor. He was a guy that was a big part of that unit. So I think just taking that into perspective is the reason why Kamon Hall was probably on, further up on this chart than these two guys, but that can change as well. I mean, that he's one of the guys that's going to be fighting for that last DB spot. Kamon Hall and Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard are all going to be fighting for that spot. And it's going to be important what they do on the field in preseason games, not only on defense, but on special teams as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be so tough because even if we're saying, someone like Tavon Campbell is a lock at 5, that means all 3 of those dudes are fighting for just that one spot.
Yeah.
That's really, really tough, right? Somebody's going to have to end up on the practice squad. Somebody's going to have to try to clear waivers. Who is more likely to make that? How much does that play a part in this, right? Which one of these guys is more likely to clear waivers when they decide to cut down to 53? I think all of that's going to play a factor in it. And I think that, you want to keep your draft picks, but they do have to go out there and earn it. And it does seem like, those are 2 of the guys I've been more impressed with because they're in the same camp as JT Woods, right? They're learning all this stuff for the first time as well. Maybe they come from systems that are more closely, more close to Brandon Staley's scheme and things like that. But these guys have come in, picked it up, and with their downs, they've had a lot of ups as well, and they deserve to be in the conversation. What about Jerry Tillery starting, though, David? If we're going to talk about blasphemous things, I know that was one that really made people upset. Even the unofficial version of it made a lot of people upset with Jerry Tillery, and I understand it. I do think that one thing there, right, is it has him above Morgan Fox, but it doesn't seem like anybody's been trying to really, really win that job. I told you I have Braden Fehoko. Having him as low as he is a shame. But they always set it up with 3 interior defensive linemen as well. The Chargers don't run a ton of that, first of all. At least they didn't last year under Brandon Staley.
They're in a lot more 6 DB groupings.
But David, it didn't stop people, though, from being like, Jerry Tillery starting? How could this be when it's like it couldn't be more clear? It's unofficial. I disagree with Jerry Tillery starting, but I do think that it's not like a lot of those guys have really, who have been the best defensive linemen so far to me have been Sebastian Joseph Day, who's just shown, okay, he's, what we thought he is.
As advertised.
He is who we thought he was.
Yes.
Exactly. and Austin Johnson, kind of quiet, but that's a quiet position too, right?
Right.
You can be quiet and
take up your double teams, do your job. Sounds good to me.
Totally. But it does seem like they want a guy like a Jerry Tillery or in the mold of a Jerry Tillery, right? Or a Morgan Fox to be that pass rushing defensive tackle. But I just had to mention that just because I know a lot of people were freaking out about it.
The one thing we do know is that he will not be sitting out the preseason this year because I am sure that they do not have a clear evaluation on who he is and that position battle as a whole. So I think we're going to see quite a bit of Jerry Tillery and Morgan Fox in the preseason, and hopefully we see some separation when the lights are on bright, and it kind of matters.
Yeah, he had a half sack with Chris Rumpf in the scrimmage, right? Yeah, he's getting praise from Brandon Staley, having a really, really good practice, even though him saying he needs a lot of improvement, right? So I think that, there's a lot to be said there. But what we know is also there's a ton more competition there.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes things tougher and makes someone like Jerry Tillery more likely to play in the preseason. I don't know how much you're going to learn about him in the preseason, but I don't know. It's just such a weird situation. I do think he's still going to get snaps this year. I don't think he's in jeopardy of losing his roster spot. How that defensive line room shakes out, though, is going to be insane. And that is one of the groups that I'll be looking at closely this weekend in the preseason. And I'll have my eyes on you tomorrow, Jerry Tillery, at Chargers training camp, because I am going to be going up for Chargers training camp on my day off, waking up at 5:30 in the morning to go do it. And it is about to be midnight my time and 2 o'clock David's time in Texas. But whatever you got to do. But to make sure you guys get the latest updates coming out of training camp, you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports, and check back here tomorrow for our recap of this practice before we get into the preseason coming up this weekend that I'm stoked for. You can also find David Droegemeier on Twitter at DroTalkSD, and you can find the show's Twitter at LockedOnLAC. But we will be back here with you guys tomorrow, getting the latest of Chargers training camp. I'll bring all my observations that I get back from with tomorrow. But thank you guys again for making this your first listen. If you need a second listen, it's fantasy football season. You can make Locked On Fantasy Football your second listen. Find the intellectual fantasy expert, Vinny Iyer, who brings over 20 years of NFL expertise and a unique angle that gives the moves that no one else has for you guys to go win your fantasy football championships, hopefully with a lot of Chargers on your roster. But to make sure you guys never miss the show, go subscribe to it on YouTube, the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel. You can also follow the show for free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcast from, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever. And make sure to rate and review the show as well. If you like the show, we always really appreciate that. You can call into the voicemail line, and we will be trying to get into some of those soon. You can get your game reactions in after the game at 323-524-7924. But that's going to do it for today, guys. Be back here tomorrow with my training camp recap of tomorrow's practice. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.